The howling wind cut through the dead trees, carrying distant echoes of screams and steel against steel. Blood streaked across the fallen warrior's face, mixing with frost as he staggered through knee-deep snow. His exhausted body nearly surrendered to the cold that clawed at his bones. The stranger, unwanted, distrusted, fought against the blizzard's fury, each labored breath forming ghostly clouds before him. Eyes watched from shadowed doorways, their owners whispering sharp words that cut deeper than any blade. Tonight, his life depended on one final act of courage, but what fate awaited him at winter's end would forever change his place among the Vikings. If you seek to understand how far redemption reaches, stay with me until this story's end. 24 hours earlier, Ivar Skjoldsson walked silently through the frozen valley of Hramsfjord, the weight of loneliness crushing his broad shoulders. The morning fog embraced the village with heavy silence, broken only by creaking wood and distant crackling fires. At 33, he was a man of contradictions, powerful in frame, yet broken in spirit. His weathered face bore witness to countless battles, but the deepest scars remained invisible to those who kept their distance. The late aurora painted the sky with ashen tones that mirrored his soul's desolation. Ivar paused at the edge of the settlement, watching the villagers move through their morning routines. Women tended fires, while men sharpened blades or repaired fishing nets, all careful to avoid his gaze. He adjusted the worn fur cape around his shoulders, the threadbare edges betraying years of neglect. Once he had worn the finest pelts, adorned with raven feathers and silver clasps, symbols of honor in a clan that now refused to speak his name. "Skjoldsson!" a voice called out, breaking his reverie. It was Tormund, one of the few who still acknowledged his existence. The older man's face was a map of wrinkles, his beard white as the snow beneath their feet. "The eastern stores need checking. Bears broke through the barrier again." Ivar nodded silently. Such tasks, solitary, dangerous, unwanted, had become his portion. He was neither slave nor freeman in the true sense. Exiled from his own clan after the incident at Ravenholm, he existed in the shadows of Hramsfjord, tolerated only for his strength and skill. "The Jarl says you'll find tools in the old shed," Tormund added, his voice lowering. "Be back before nightfall. Storm's coming." The eastern storehouse stood half a league from the village, a journey Ivar made with mechanical precision. His hand rested on the worn handle of his axe, once gleaming with runes of victory, now dulled by neglect. The blade had tasted the blood of Saxons and Franks in raids that earned him glory and songs. Now it split only wood, and occasionally the skull of a predator that ventured too close to the village. As he trudged through the deepening snow, memories surfaced unbidden, fragments of a life shattered by a single decision. The face of Sigurd Haraldsson, his blood brother and chieftain, appeared before him. The betrayal hadn't been Ivar's intention, but intentions meant nothing against consequences. 3 years had passed since that night of fire and blood, yet the weight remained, crushing his spirit with each passing season. The storehouse came into view, its roof partially collapsed under heavy snow. Bear tracks circled the structure, massive paws having left deep impressions. Ivar knelt, examining their pattern. The creature had been desperate, driven by hunger to risk approaching human settlements. Winter had been unusually harsh, forcing even the mightiest beasts to abandon their territories in search of food. Much like himself, Ivar thought bitterly.
He worked methodically, repairing the damaged barrier with fallen timber. The labor was mindless but necessary, allowing his thoughts to drift toward the coming night.
His shelter, a small hut at the village edge, offered little comfort against the approaching storm. The fire would need extra wood, and his meager stores of dried meat would have to stretch another week until the trading party returned from the southern settlements. The sun hung low when he finished, casting long shadows across the pristine snow. Ivar gathered his tools, preparing for the return journey, when a sound caught his attention, faint but distinct against the wind's whisper. He paused, head tilted. There it came again, a whimper, barely audible, human rather than animal. Caution made him draw his axe as he followed the sound toward the frozen creek that ran behind the storehouse. The ice had formed strange patterns there, creating small caves and hollows between rocks. The whimpering grew louder as he approached a particular formation where the creek bent sharply around a fallen oak. Between the frost-covered stones, huddled against the bitter cold, lay a child. Ivar's breath caught in his throat. The boy couldn't have been more than 8 winters old, his small frame trembling violently. Dirt and blood caked his face, and his clothes, once fine wool by the look of the weave, hung in tatters. What struck Ivar most were the child's eyes, large, blue, and filled with a terror that transcended ordinary fear. A flash of recognition hit Ivar like a physical blow. Those eyes, he had seen their like before, in a man who had once saved his life during the raid on Northumbria. Halfdan the Fair, they had called him, a warrior from a neighboring clan who had fallen beneath Saxon spears while covering their retreat. Initial fear gripped Ivar's heart. Taking in a child, especially one who might belong to another clan, could be seen as kidnapping or worse, theft of another Jar's property. Such an action could cost him what little tolerance he had earned in Hrafnsfjord. The wise choice would be to leave the boy, perhaps alert someone else to his presence. Yet something deeper than wisdom stirred within him. A fragment of humanity he thought long extinguished flickered to life. "Boy," he said, his voice rough from disuse, "can you stand?" The child pressed himself further against the rocks, eyes wide with terror. Ivar sighed, setting his axe aside and crouching to appear less threatening. "I won't harm you. What's your name?" Silence stretched between them, broken only by the child's chattering teeth. Finally, in a voice so soft it might have been the wind, "Leif." "Leif," Ivar repeated. "You'll die here before nightfall. The storm comes. Will you let me help you?" The boy regarded him with suspicion born of experience. Whatever had brought him to this creek, alone and injured, had taught him harsh lessons about trust. Slowly, painfully, he nodded once. Ivar removed his cape, wrapping it around the boy's small frame. The child weighed almost nothing as he lifted him, bones prominent beneath the thin layer of flesh. How long had he been without food, without shelter? The questions could wait. Survival came first. As he carried Leif back toward the village, snow began to fall, first as gentle flakes, then with increasing urgency. The storm Tormund predicted had arrived early, and with it came a decision that would alter both their fates. Ivar changed direction, heading not toward the main settlement, but to his own isolated hut. Bringing a strange child directly into the village would raise questions he wasn't prepared to answer. His shelter stood apart from others, a deliberate distance that reflected his status. The single-room structure offered little comfort. A hearth, a sleeping platform covered with worn furs, shelves holding meager provisions, and the few possessions he'd managed to keep. Yet, against the growing storm, it represented salvation.
Ivar pushed through the door, laying Leif gently on the sleeping platform. The boy had fallen into a half-conscious state, his breathing shallow. Working quickly, Ivar built up the fire, its warm glow filling the small space. He melted snow in an iron pot, adding dried herbs, the last of his supply, to create a simple broth. As the liquid warmed, he turned his attention to the boy's injuries. Careful hands removed the tattered clothing, revealing what the rags had hidden. Bruises in various stages of healing covered the thin chest and arms. A burn mark marred his right forearm, not accidental but deliberate, the kind used to punish or mark property. Around his neck hung a wooden amulet carved with a symbol Ivar recognized with growing unease. The mark of the Eriksson clan, rivals to Ravensford for generations. The implications settled heavily on Ivar's shoulders. This was no ordinary orphan, but potentially the son of an enemy. The Jarl would demand his immediate surrender, and the boy's fate would be sealed. A hostage at best, a sacrifice to old hatreds at worst. Yet something about the amulet triggered another memory. Halfdan the Fair had worn a similar marking, though his had been silver rather than wood. If this child was connected to Halfdan, then he was no enemy, but the son of an ally, a man who had paid the ultimate price for his loyalty. Life stirred as Ivar cleaned the dirt from his face with a damp cloth. The boy flinched at the touch, eyes flying open in panic. "Easy," Ivar murmured. "You're safe." The child's gaze darted around the unfamiliar surroundings, body tensing for flight. Ivar recognized the response. He had seen it in captured wolves, in cornered warriors, in himself when he awoke from nightmares of that fateful night. "The storm rages outside," he continued, keeping his voice low and steady. "You need warmth and food. Then we can speak of what brought you here." Leif watched him with wary calculation beyond his years. Slowly, the tension in his small frame eased. Not from trust, but from the recognition of necessity. He accepted the wooden cup of broth Ivar offered, drinking with the desperate thirst of one long deprived. "Small sips," Ivar cautioned. "Too much at once will make you sick." The boy obeyed, though his eyes never left Ivar's face. When he had finished, Ivar wrapped him in furs, noting how the child's eyelids grew heavy despite his obvious desire to remain alert. "Sleep," Ivar said. "No harm will come to you here." As Leif drifted into exhausted slumber, Ivar returned to the hearth, feeding the fire with precious wood from his dwindling supply. The storm's howl intensified outside, sealing them together in this moment of uncertain alliance. Tomorrow would bring questions, decisions, consequences. For tonight he had chosen a path that defied wisdom, but answered a deeper call, one he had thought silenced forever. In the dancing firelight, Ivar studied the sleeping child. What circumstances had brought him to that frozen creek? What violence had marked his body? The amulet suggested connections to both enemy and ally, a puzzle whose solution might prove dangerous for them both. Ivar touched the thin scar that ran down the left side of his own face, a reminder of choices made and prices paid. He had failed Sigurd Haraldsson, failed his clan, failed himself. Perhaps in this child, the gods offered not just a test, but a chance to rewrite his story. The thought brought no comfort, only a grim determination. Morning would reveal whether his decision had been mercy or madness. Dawn arrived with eerie silence, the storm having exhausted itself during the night. Ivar woke to find Leif already alert, sitting wrapped in furs, examining the hut's sparse interior with the methodical attention of one accustomed to assessing new environments for threats and escapes. "You're hungry," Ivar stated rather than asked, moving to prepare a simple meal of dried fish and the last of his bread. He placed the food before the boy, who hesitated only briefly before eating with careful restraint, another sign of his unusual upbringing. "Where did you come from?" Ivar asked when Leif had finished. The boy's fingers closed protectively around his wooden amulet. "North," he finally answered, his voice stronger than the previous day, but still guarded. "From Ravnfjord." Ivar's brow furrowed. Ravnfjord lay 3 days' journey through treacherous mountain passes, territory claimed by the Eriksson clan. "That's Eriksson land. Is that your clan?" Leif's eyes widened with sudden fear. "Are you going to take me back?" "No," Ivar answered truthfully, though he couldn't have explained why the decision came so easily. "But I need to understand how you came to be alone by the creek." The story emerged in fragments, pieced together through Leif's hesitant answers. His father had died in a distant raid 2 years prior. His mother had remarried, but her new husband, a man close to the Jarl, had little use for another man's son. When illness took his mother this past autumn, life had become unbearable. Beatings, starvation, and finally the burning brand when he'd attempted to take food from the winter stores. "I ran," Leif concluded simply. 3 nights ago. I heard stories of Hrafnsfjord, that sometimes they took in people from other places." The irony wasn't lost on Ivar. Hrafnsfjord did occasionally accept outsiders, but he, born of their own blood, remained forever marked as other. Yet the boy's words confirmed something else. If his father had died in a raid 2 years ago, it aligned with the Northumbrian expedition where Halfdan had fallen. "Your father," Ivar said carefully, "was his name Halfdan?" The change in Leif was immediate, a straightening of his small shoulders, eyes suddenly bright with emotion. "You knew him?" "He saved my life," Ivar answered, the admission feeling like stones lifted from his chest. "At Northumbria, he stood against 6 Saxon warriors to cover our retreat." Leif's expression transformed with hunger greater than any physical need. "Tell me," he whispered. "No one ever speaks of him anymore." So Ivar told him of Halfdan's courage, his skill with sword and spear, the songs he would sing before battle to lift men's spirits. He spoke of the blood oath between their clans, forgotten now in the wake of newer conflicts, and of the debt he personally owed to Halfdan's sacrifice. As he spoke, something shifted between them, a fragile bridge forming across the chasm of suspicion. Leif moved closer to the fire, closer to Ivar, his small face animated with questions. For a brief moment, the hut felt less like a place of exile and more like a home. The illusion shattered with a heavy pounding on the door. Ivar rose swiftly, motioning for Leif to remain silent. The boy needed no instruction, instantly retreating to the shadows of the sleeping platform, pulling furs around himself until only watchful eyes remained visible. Opening the door revealed Tormund, his expression grave beneath the frost that clung to his beard. "You didn't return to report on the storehouse," the old man said without preamble. "The storm came early," Ivar replied, blocking the entrance with his body. "The repairs are complete." Tormund's eyes narrowed, looking past Ivar to the interior of the hut. "You have company?" Years of maintaining a stone face served Ivar well now. "What would make you think that?" "2 sets of tracks in the snow leading to your door," Tormund answered. "One large, one small, unless you've shrunk considerably since yesterday." Ivar considered his options. Lying would only worsen the inevitable discovery. "I found a child, half frozen by the creek. I brought him here to warm him before the storm hit." "A child?" Tormund's bushy eyebrows rose. "From where?" "Lost, I think. He was too weak to say much." The old man's weathered face revealed nothing of his thoughts.
The Jarl will want to know. Strangers aren't welcome without his approval, especially children who might be claimed by other clans. I'll bring him to the hall when he's stronger, Ivar promised, knowing the delay was dangerous but necessary. Leif needed more recovery time, and he needed to formulate a plan that wouldn't end with both their deaths. Tormund studied him with ancient, knowing eyes. "By midday," he finally said, "not later. There are already whispers." After the old man departed, Ivar closed the door, leaning his forehead against the rough wood. Whispers. The currency of small settlements, more powerful than silver in shaping fates. "They'll send me back," Leif's voice came from behind him, small but certain. Ivar turned to find the boy standing in the center of the hut, shoulders squared, despite the fear evident in his eyes. "Not if I can help it," he answered, surprised by his own resolve. "Why would you help me?" The question contained no childish innocence, only the wariness of one who had learned that kindness always carried a price. Ivar knelt to meet Leif's gaze directly. "Because your father would have done the same for my son, had I one. Because a debt unpaid haunts a man into the next world." The truth was both simpler and more complex. In this child, Ivar saw a chance to reclaim something of his lost honor, not through grand gestures or battlefield glory, but through the protection of one vulnerable life, a life connected to a man who had valued honor above survival. "We have until midday," he continued, rising to gather what they would need. "By then, I must present you to the Jarl. But first, you need proper clothing, and I need to speak with someone who might help us." From a wooden chest, Ivar withdrew a small tunic and trousers, clothes he had crafted during long winter nights when sleep evaded him. They were meant as trade goods, payment for necessities he couldn't provide himself. The garments would be large on Leif, but far better than his tattered remains. As the boy dressed, Ivar prepared himself for what would likely be the most dangerous negotiation of his life. The Jarl of Ravensfjord, Gunnar Thorvaldsson, was not known for mercy toward potential threats, a category that would certainly include the son of a rival clan. Their only hope lay in the old alliance between their families, in Halfdan's sacrifice, and perhaps in the Jarl's pragmatic nature. "Stay close to me," Ivar instructed as they stepped outside into the blinding white landscape. "Speak only when spoken to. If anyone asks, your father was Halfdan the Fair, who died saving Hransfjord warriors at Northumbria." Leif nodded solemnly, his small hand finding Ivar's with unexpected trust. The village sprawled before them, smoke rising from multiple hearths into the clear winter sky. People moved through their morning tasks, pausing to stare as the unlikely pair made their way toward the center. Whispers followed them, spreading like ripples in still water. Ivar's destination wasn't the Jarl's Hall, but a smaller structure near the village heart, the dwelling of Astrid the Wise, a woman whose counsel was valued even by the Jarl himself. If anyone could help navigate the dangerous waters ahead, it would be her. Astrid's home announced itself through the scent of herbs and smoke that hung in the air around it. Runes carved into the doorframe offered protection and invited wisdom to dwell within. Ivar knocked twice, aware of the growing crowd of curious onlookers gathering at a distance. The door opened to reveal a woman of indeterminate age, her silver-streaked hair falling in a single braid over one shoulder. Sharp eyes assessed them both in a single glance. "Skjoldsson," she acknowledged, her voice neither warm nor cold. "And a guest, I see. Come in before you become the morning's entertainment."
The interior of Astrid's dwelling contrasted sharply with Ivar's sparse hut.
Bundles of dried plants hung from ceiling beams, their subtle fragrances mingling with wood smoke. Shelves lined the walls, holding clay jars, wooden boxes, and items whose purposes remained mysterious to most villagers. "So," Astrid said, once the door closed behind them, "this is the child everyone is already talking about." Ivar shouldn't have been surprised. News traveled faster than any messenger in a settlement this size. "His name is Leif. He's Halfdan the Fair's son." Astrid's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication that the information held significance. She knelt before Leif, studying him with the same intensity she might give to an unfamiliar herb. "You have your father's eyes," she finally said, "and his stubborn chin." Leif blinked in surprise. "You knew him too?" "I know most who pass through Hransfjord," she replied, rising to fetch a small clay cup from a shelf. She filled it with liquid from a covered pot near the hearth. "Drink this. It will help with the cold that's trying to settle in your chest." While Leif sipped the bitter medicine, Astrid turned her attention to Ivar. "You've created quite a problem for yourself, Skjoldsson. Gunnar will see this boy as either threat or opportunity, nothing in between." "I know," Ivar acknowledged, "but I couldn't leave him to die." "No," she agreed, her voice softening slightly. "That would not have been your way, even now." She studied him for a moment longer. "You plan to claim the debt owed to Halfdan?" "It's the truth. Without him, 20 Hransfjord warriors would have fallen that day, myself included." Astrid nodded slowly. "Truth has power, but so does fear. The Eriksson clan has grown aggressive since Halfdan's death. Gunnar may see this child as the spark that could ignite open conflict." "What would you advise?" Ivar asked, humility replacing pride. In his former life, he would never have sought counsel from anyone, let alone a woman, however respected. Exile had taught him the value of wisdom over strength. "Take him to Gunnar openly," she said after consideration. "Hide nothing of how you found him or who he is, but before you do—" She moved to a small chest, withdrawing something wrapped in faded cloth. "Show him this." Ivar accepted the bundle, unwrapping it carefully to reveal a silver arm ring engraved with intertwined serpents, the mark of blood brotherhood between warriors. "Halfdan gave this to Gunnar's father before the Northumbrian raid," Astrid explained. "A renewal of the old alliance between your clans. Gunnar has forgotten, or chosen to forget, but the ring will remind him of bonds that predate current grievances." Hope flickered within Ivar's chest. "Why would you help us?" Astrid's weathered face revealed a brief smile. "Perhaps I grow tired of watching a good man punish himself for a mistake made in youth. Perhaps I remember when Hraffensfjord valued honor above convenience." She turned to Leif, who had finished his medicine. "Or perhaps I simply dislike seeing children suffer for the failings of men." Armed with Astrid's gift and advice, Ivar led Leif toward the Jarl's hall at the village center. Word of their coming had clearly preceded them. A crowd had gathered in the open space before the great wooden structure. Faces both familiar and strange watched their approach, expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The hall doors stood open, framing the massive figure of Gunnar Thorvaldsson. The Jarl of Hraffensfjord had aged since Ivar's exile, gray now streaking his once golden beard, but his presence remained commanding. Flanking him stood his closest advisors and warriors, hands resting meaningfully on weapon hilts. Ivar felt Leif's hand tighten around his own as they approached. The boy's courage impressed him. There was no cowering, no tears,
only the straight-backed dignity that spoke of his lineage.
Ivar Skjoldsson, Gunnar's voice carried across the suddenly silent gathering. I hear you've taken it upon yourself to bring a stranger into our midst without permission. Ivar stopped at a respectful distance, inclining his head slightly, acknowledgment without submission. I found this boy near death by the Eastern Creek. I gave him shelter from the storm. A charitable act, Gunnar replied, his tone suggesting it was anything but. And now you bring him before me? Why not earlier? He needed rest and warmth. I come now in daylight, hiding nothing. The Jarl's cold gaze shifted to Leif. Who are you, boy? What clan claims you? Before Ivar could intervene, Leif stepped forward, his voice clear despite its youth. I am Leif Halfdanson of Ravnfjord. My father was Halfdan the Fair, who died saving Ravnsfjord warriors at Northumbria. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Gunnar's expression hardened. Eriksson territory, he said flatly. You bring an Eriksson child into my village, Skjoldsson? Have you forgotten where your loyalties should lie? I have forgotten nothing, Ivar answered, producing the silver arm ring. Least of all the debt we owe to Halfdan the Fair. This ring was given to your father as a sign of blood brotherhood. Halfdan honored that bond with his life. Gunnar stared at the silver band, recognition flickering across his features. For a moment, the years seemed to fall away, revealing the younger man who had once valued such oaths. Then his expression closed again. A convenient story, he said. But even if true, it changes nothing. The boy is Eriksson by blood and claim. Harboring him risks bringing their wrath upon us. The Erikssons drove him out, Ivar countered. Look at him, Gunnar. Look at the brand on his arm. Is this how allies treat the sons of their fallen warriors? The crowd's attention shifted to Leif's exposed forearm, where the burn marks stood out starkly against his pale skin. Even the hardest faces softened slightly at this evidence of cruelty against a child. Gunnar seemed about to speak when a commotion at the edge of the gathering interrupted. The crowd parted reluctantly to admit a group of armed men, their dark furs and iron-studded leather marking them as outsiders. At their head strode a tall figure whose very presence seemed to drop the temperature further, Ulfric Gudmundsson, emissary of the Eriksson clan. "Well met, Gunnar Thorvaldsson," Ulfric called, his deep voice carrying a false cordiality that fooled no one. "It seems we arrive at an opportune moment." Ivar instinctively moved Leif behind him, noting how the boy had gone rigid with terror at the newcomer's appearance. Whatever he had suffered in Ravnfjord, Ulfric had clearly played a part in it. "Ulfric," Gunnar acknowledged with visible displeasure, "your presence in Hrapsfjord is unexpected." "As unexpected as finding stolen property in your midst?" Ulfric's cold gaze fixed on Leif. "We've been tracking the boy for 3 days. He belongs to Hrapsfjord and must be returned." "He belongs to no one," Ivar interjected, anger overriding caution. "He's the son of Halfdan the Fair, a free man and ally to Hrapsfjord." Ulfric's attention shifted to Ivar, his scarred face twisting into something resembling amusement. "Ah, the disgraced Skjoldsson, still trying to reclaim honor by playing hero?" He turned back to Gunnar. "The boy is under the protection of Jarl Eriksson himself. His return is non-negotiable." The situation had deteriorated beyond anything Ivar had anticipated. One Jarl before him, another's emissary at his back, and between them a child whose fate hung in the balance.
The crowd had grown larger, tension thickening the air like smoke before a conflagration. Gunnar studied the scene with the calculating eye of a leader weighing political necessities against personal inclinations. "The matter requires consideration," he finally said.
"Ulfric, you and your men will be given guest quarters. The boy will remain under guard until I decide." "Under whose guard?" Ulfric demanded. "Mine," Ivar stated firmly, meeting Gunnar's gaze with a challenge. For a long moment, the Jarl said nothing. Then, to everyone's surprise, "So be it. Ivar Skjoldsson will be responsible for the boy until judgment is rendered. At tomorrow's council, we will hear all claims fully." Ulfric's face darkened with barely contained rage. "This is an insult to the Eriksson clan. The boy is ours by right." "You are guests in Hrafnsfjord," Gunnar replied coldly. "You will abide by our customs and laws while here. The council will determine what is right." As the crowd dispersed, muttering and speculating about the confrontation they had witnessed, Ivar felt the weight of what had just occurred. Gunnar had neither accepted nor rejected their claim outright. A political maneuver that bought time but resolved nothing. Tomorrow's council would determine whether Leif returned to certain misery or found sanctuary among former allies. More immediately concerning was Ulfric's presence. The man's reputation for cruelty was well known, and his interest in Leif seemed disproportionate for a mere runaway. Something deeper motivated the Eriksson emissary, something Ivar needed to understand before they faced the council. "Come," he said quietly to Leif, whose face had gone pale beneath its dirt. "We need to prepare." They retreated to Ivar's hut, aware of the eyes that followed, both Hrafnsfjord villagers and Eriksson warriors. Once inside, Leif collapsed onto the sleeping platform, his small body shaking with reaction to the confrontation. "He'll take me back," he whispered. "Ulfric always gets what he wants." Ivar knelt beside him. "Why does he want you so badly? You're one child. Why track you for days through winter storms?" Leif's fingers closed around his wooden amulet. "Because of this," he said, pulling it over his head. "My father gave it to me before his last voyage. He said it would protect me, that it contained power no one else could use." Ivar accepted the amulet, turning it over in his calloused hands. The wood was old, darkened with age and handling. The carved symbol matched the Eriksson clan mark, but something about it seemed older, more primal. "What power?" he asked, returning the amulet to Leif. "I don't know," the boy admitted. "But after father died, men came from other settlements to see it. Ulfric tried to take it, but mother hid it. After she died," his voice faltered, "he searched everywhere. When he found me wearing it, he was furious. That's when—" He didn't need to finish. The burn mark told its own story. Ivar paced the small confines of the hut, mind racing. If the amulet held value beyond sentiment, it explained Ulfric's determination. It might also provide leverage, or additional danger. "Tomorrow, at the council, you must wear it openly," he decided. "Whatever power it holds, the knowledge of its existence should be shared among all, not just the Erikssons." As daylight faded, Ivar prepared for what might be their last night of relative safety. He added wood to the fire, cooked their meager meal, and checked the edge on his axe. Rituals of normality in a situation far from normal. Leif watched him with solemn eyes that had witnessed too much for his years. "Will you tell me a story?" he asked suddenly, "about my father?" The request caught Ivar off guard. In his former life, he had been known as a skilled skald, weaving tales that captivated warriors around evening fires.
Since his exile, no one had asked for his stories. "I will," he agreed, setting aside his axe. "I'll tell you of the time Halfdan the Fair outswam a sea serpent to win a wager with the king of the Danes." As Ivar's deep voice filled the small space with adventures and heroism, Leif's tense expression gradually relaxed. For a brief moment, he was simply a child again, lost in tales of his father's courage rather than memories of cruelty. Outside, the village settled into uneasy slumber, divided in its sympathies and uncertain of tomorrow's outcome. In the guest quarters, Ulfric Gudmundsson plotted with his men, determined not to return to Ravnfjord empty-handed. In the Jarl's Hall, Gunnar Thorvaldsson weighed political necessity against ancient bonds of honor. And in a small hut at the edge of the settlement, a disgraced warrior and a hunted child found temporary solace in stories of better days. Morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised flesh, heavy clouds promising more snow before nightfall. Ivar woke to find Leif already dressed, the wooden amulet displayed prominently against his borrowed tunic. The boy's face showed evidence of poor sleep, but also determination that belied his years. "Are you ready?" Ivar asked, knowing the question encompassed far more than their imminent departure for the council. Leif nodded once, shoulders squared. "I won't go back with him. I'd rather run again." "It won't come to that," Ivar promised, though the words felt hollow against the reality they faced. He checked his axe one final time, not because he expected to use it, but because the familiar weight brought comfort. The village center had transformed overnight. Benches had been arranged in a semicircle before the Jarl's Hall, creating an outdoor thing space despite the cold. Such arrangements were typically reserved for summer gatherings or matters of grave importance. That Gunnar had ordered it for this occasion spoke volumes about how seriously he took the situation. Villagers had already begun to gather, stamping feet against the cold and sharing hushed speculations. The Eriksson contingent stood as a dark block to one side, Ulfric's imposing figure at their center. His scarred face revealed nothing, but his eyes tracked Ivar and Leif's approach with predatory focus. Gunnar emerged from the hall flanked by his advisors. He wore formal attire, a fur-lined cloak fastened with silver brooches, arm rings gleaming against his muscular forearms. The Jarl took his seat at the center of the assembly, gesturing for silence. "We gather to resolve a matter of competing claims," he began, voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "The boy Leif Halfdansson stands before us, claimed by the Eriksson clan through their emissary Ulfric Gudmundsson. He is also claimed as the son of an ally by Ivar Skjoldsson, acting on behalf of a debt owed to Halfdan the Fair." The formality of the proceedings surprised Ivar. He had expected a quick judgment favoring political expediency, not this semblance of traditional justice. Perhaps Astrid's intervention had affected Gunnar more deeply than he'd realized. "Ulfric Gudmundsson will speak first," Gunnar continued, nodding toward the Eriksson emissary. Ulfric stepped forward, his massive frame blocking the weak winter sunlight. "The matter is simple," he began, voice resonating with practiced authority. "The boy belongs to the Eriksson clan by blood and law. His father, Halfdan, pledged allegiance to Jarl Eriksson before his death. The child's place is in Ravnfjord, under proper guardianship." His gaze swept the assembly, assessing his audience with cold calculation.
Furthermore, he has stolen property of significant value to our clan, an heirloom entrusted to Halfdan, but never his to give away, least of all to a child." Mutters rippled through the crowd at this revelation. Ivar felt Leif stiffen beside him, small hands curling into fists. "What property?" Gunnar asked, leaning forward slightly. Ulfric pointed directly at the wooden amulet hanging from Leif's neck. "That token contains secrets of our clan, navigational knowledge passed down through generations. It rightfully belongs to Jarl Eriksson himself, not this runaway." The claim was cleverly constructed, acknowledging the amulet's importance while disguising its true nature. If it contained merely navigational secrets, why such determination to recover it? Why the violence against a child? "Ivar Skjoldsson," Gunnar said, turning his attention to them, "you may speak your claim." Ivar stepped forward, conscious of how the assembly viewed him, the disgraced warrior, the exile, the betrayer. Yet he stood straight, meeting their gazes without flinching. "Halfdan the Fair saved 20 Hrafnsfjord warriors at Northumbria, myself included," he began, voice clear in the winter air. "He stood against overwhelming odds to cover our retreat, knowing it meant his death. Such a sacrifice creates a blood debt that cannot be ignored or forgotten." He gestured toward Leif. "This boy is Halfdan's only living child. He came to us bearing the marks of abuse, starvation, beatings, and this." Ivar gently turned Leif's arm to display the burn mark. "This was done by men who claim the right to call themselves his guardians." Angry murmurs rose from parts of the crowd. Even among Vikings, deliberate cruelty to children, especially a warrior's orphaned son, violated deeply held principles. "As for the amulet," Ivar continued, "Halfdan himself gave it to his son before his final voyage. If it contains clan secrets, then Halfdan, as a free warrior, judged his son worthy to inherit them." Ulfric stepped forward, rage contorting his features. "You speak of matters you don't understand, Skjoldsson. The boy is—" "The boy can speak for himself." Leif's clear voice cut through the tension, silencing both men. All eyes turned to the small figure standing between the towering adults. Despite his size, despite the circumstances, Leif projected a dignity that commanded attention. Gunnar's eyebrows rose slightly. "Very well. Leif Halfdansson, what would you tell this council?" Leif stepped forward, the wooden amulet clutched in one hand. "My father was Halfdan the Fair. Before he left for his last journey, he gave me this." He held up the amulet. "He said it had been in our family for generations, that it would protect me when he could not." His small voice gained strength as he continued. "After he died, my mother remarried. Her new husband, Ulfric's brother, wanted the amulet. When she refused to let him take it, he—" Leif's voice faltered briefly. "He was cruel to us both. After Mother died this winter, Ulfric came himself." The boy turned to display his burned arm more prominently. "He did this when I wouldn't tell him where the amulet was hidden. He said next time it would be my face." Shock rippled through the assembly. Even among Ulfric's men, several shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to meet their neighbors' horrified stares. "You lying little serpent," Ulfric snarled, taking a menacing step forward. "The burn was punishment for theft, nothing more." "Enough!" Gunnar's voice cracked like a whip. "No man threatens a child in my presence, Ulfric Gudmundsson. Step back or lose the right to speak further. The Eriksson emissary retreated, barely containing his fury. The atmosphere had shifted palpably. What had begun as a political negotiation had transformed into a moral judgment. "Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this matter?" Gunnar asked, scanning the assembly. To Ivar's surprise, Astrid the Wise rose from her place among the villagers. "I would speak, if the Jarl permits." Gunnar nodded, respect evident in his expression. "Always, Astrid." The older woman moved to stand before the gathering, her single braid gleaming silver in the winter light. "I knew Halfdan the Fair," she began. "I tended his wounds after the raid on the western settlements, when he fought alongside Hrafsfjord warriors against common enemies." Her clear gaze swept the assembly.
"The amulet the boy wears is indeed ancient, older than the Eriksson clan, older perhaps than our settlement in these lands. It contains no mere navigational secrets, but something far more valuable. The location of Halfdan's ancestral burial ground, where generations of his forebears placed not only their dead, but their greatest treasures." This revelation sent a wave of whispers through the crowd. Viking burial hoards were legendary, their locations jealously guarded family secrets. Halfdan entrusted this knowledge to his son, as was his right, Astrid continued. That Ulfric Gudmundsson seeks it through violence against a child tells us all we need to know about his true intentions. Ulfric surged forward, hand going to his weapon. "You speak of what you cannot know, old woman." His warriors tensed, hands dropping to sword hilts. Hrafsfjord men responded in kind, the atmosphere teetering on the edge of violence. "Hold," Gunnar commanded, rising to his feet. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, freezing everyone in place. "There will be no bloodshed at this council. Ulfric, control yourself, or be removed." For a tense moment it seemed the Eriksson emissary might defy the order. Then, with visible effort, he mastered his rage, though his eyes promised future retribution. Gunnar surveyed the assembly, weighing the testimony and the reactions it had provoked. Ivar stood protectively near Leif, acutely aware that whatever decision came next would alter both their lives irrevocably. "I have heard enough," the Jarl finally declared. "This council finds that the boy Leif Halfdansson has suffered unjust treatment at the hands of those who claimed guardianship. The blood debt owed to his father, Halfdan the Fair, obligates Hafrsfjord to offer him protection." Relief washed through Ivar, so intense it nearly buckled his knees. Beside him, Leif stood straight, face carefully composed, despite the tears that threatened at the corners of his eyes. "Furthermore," Gunnar continued, "the amulet is rightfully his inheritance from his father. No claim from the Eriksson clan supersedes a father's gift to his son." Ulfric's face contorted with fury. "This is an outrage. Jarl Eriksson will not stand for such insult." "Then let him come himself to dispute it," Gunnar replied coldly. "Until then, my judgment stands. The boy remains in Hrafnsfjord, under the guardianship of Ivar Skjoldsson, who claimed the debt owed to Halfdan." The pronouncement hit Ivar like a physical blow. Guardianship? He had sought to save Leif from returning to abuse, yes, but becoming responsible for a child? He, the exile, the man who had failed his own clan? This was beyond anything he had anticipated. Ulfric's laugh cut through his shock, a harsh, mocking sound. "Perfect justice, Gunnar. Entrust the boy to a known traitor. When he betrays this child as he betrayed Sigurd Haraldsson, remember that I warned you." The barb struck its intended target. Ivar felt the familiar shame rise within him, threatening to drown the momentary triumph. Ulfric had lost the immediate battle, but landed a wounding blow nonetheless. "You and your men will leave Hrafnsfjord by midday," Gunnar told Ulfric, ignoring the provocation. "This matter is concluded." As the assembly dispersed, Ivar stood frozen, the weight of his new responsibility settling over him like a heavy cloak. Leif looked up at him, blue eyes wide with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Does this mean I can stay with you?" the boy asked quietly. Before Ivar could answer, Gunnar approached them, his expression unreadable. "Walk with me, Skjoldsson," he commanded. "The boy, too." They followed the Jarl away from the dispersing crowd, toward the shore where Hrafnsfjord met the sea. Ice floes dotted the gray water, and in the distance mountains rose like sleeping giants against the winter sky. "You've won your point," Gunnar said without preamble. "The boy stays."
"But understand what that means, Ivar. You're responsible for him now. His safety, his training, his future." "I understand," Ivar replied, though in truth the full implications were only beginning to register. Gunnar turned to face him directly. "Do you? You live as an exile, performing tasks others avoid, surviving on the margins of our community. Is that the life you would offer a child?" The question stung with its accuracy. What did he have to offer Leif beyond bare survival? "It's better than what awaited him in Ravnfjord," Ivar answered simply. Gunnar studied him for a long moment. Perhaps. His gaze shifted to Leif, who stood quietly beside Ivar, trying to appear invisible. "Boy, do you understand what happened today?" Leif nodded solemnly. "You said I could stay with Ivar instead of going back with Ulfric. And is that what you want? To stay with a man you barely know?" The boy's response came without hesitation. "He saved me when no one else would. He told me stories about my father. He didn't try to take my amulet." His small hand found Ivar's larger one. "Yes, I want to stay with him." Something shifted in Gunnar's expression, a softening, almost imperceptible beneath his stern exterior. "Very well." He returned his attention to Ivar. "Your status changes with this responsibility. You may resume hunting with the others. Your portion of community stores will be increased to account for the boy's needs." The pronouncement represented a significant change, the first easing of Ivar's exile in 3 years. Not forgiveness, not full restoration, but a step toward reintegration. "Thank you," Ivar said, the words inadequate for the unexpected mercy. Gunnar nodded once, then added, "Be warned. Ulfric Gudmundsson is not a man who forgets slights. He will return, perhaps with Jarl Eriksson himself. Whatever that amulet truly contains, they want it badly enough to risk conflict with Ravnfjord." "We'll be prepared," Ivar promised. As Gunnar turned to leave, he paused, looking back. "Sigurd Haraldsson spoke of you often before his death, Skjoldsson, even after what happened at Ravenholm. He believed you would find your way back to honor." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. Perhaps he wasn't wrong. With that, the Jarl departed, leaving Ivar stunned by the revelation. Sigurd had spoken of him? After everything? The knowledge settled like a warm coal in his chest, painful yet illuminating. Leif tugged at his hand. What happens now? Ivar looked down at the boy who had somehow become his ward, his responsibility, perhaps his redemption. "Now we go home," he said simply, "and figure out the rest as we go."
They walked back toward Ivar's hut, no longer just a place of exile, but now, improbably, a home for two. The village they passed through seemed changed somehow. Faces that had turned away, now nodding in acknowledgement. Children watching life with curious eyes rather than fearful avoidance. Astrid the Wise intercepted them near the village center, her knowing eyes assessing them both. "You've acquired quite a responsibility, Skjoldsson," she observed. "It seems I have," Ivar agreed, still processing the morning's events. The older woman smiled. "Good. It's time you had something to live for beyond memory and regret." She produced a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Herbs for the boy's arm. The burn will heal cleaner with these." As Ivar accepted the gift, Astrid leaned closer. "Be vigilant," she murmured. "Ulfric leaves today, but his eyes remain. Not everyone in Hrapsfjord welcomes the Jarl's decision." The warning chilled him. Of course there would be those who resented Gunnar's judgment, those who remembered Ivar's disgrace, those with ties to the Eriksson clan, those who simply feared change or conflict. "I understand," he replied quietly. Astrid straightened, her public voice returning. "Bring the boy to me tomorrow. I'll begin teaching him our healing ways." Every warrior should know how to tend wounds, his own and others. As they continued toward home, Leif's steps grew lighter, as though the council's decision had physically lifted weight from his small shoulders. For the first time, Ivar saw glimpses of the child beneath the survivor. Curiosity about his surroundings, questions about the village and its inhabitants, even a tentative smile when they passed a group of playing children. By the time they reached Ivar's hut, snow had begun to fall again, fat, lazy flakes that transformed the landscape into something softer, more forgiving. Inside, the dwelling already felt different, no longer merely shelter, but the beginning of something new. "We'll need another sleeping platform," Ivar mused aloud, surveying the space with fresh eyes. "And more furs. Better food stores, too." "I can help," Leif offered eagerly. "I know how to fish through ice and trap small game. I'm good at finding birds' nests, too." Ivar smiled despite himself. "We'll start tomorrow. For now, let's make this place more suitable for two." They spent the remainder of the day reorganizing the small hut, clearing space, repairing weak spots in the walls where winter drafts slipped through, taking inventory of what they had and what they would need. The ordinary tasks took on new significance, each one a small step toward building something neither had expected to find. As evening approached, Ivar prepared their meal. Simple fare, but more generous than usual, thanks to gifts from villagers who had approached throughout the day. A smoked fish from Tormund, fresh bread from the baker's wife, even a small pot of honey from a farmer whose son Ivar had once pulled from a frozen pond. "Why are they being kind now?" Leif asked as they ate by firelight. Ivar considered the question. "People respect courage," he finally answered. "You showed courage today, standing up to Ulfric. And perhaps—" he hesitated. "Perhaps they see something worth respecting in my choice to help you. Because of honor? Yes, honor matters to our people, sometimes above all else." Leif was quiet for a moment, contemplating this with the seriousness of a much older person. "Is that why you were exiled? Because you lost honor?" The question cut to the heart of everything, the past Ivar carried, the shame that had defined him for 3 years, the reason he had recognized in life a chance for redemption. "Yes," he admitted, voice low, "I made a choice that betrayed my oath to my Jarl, to Sigurd Haraldsson. People died because of my mistake. Such things can't be forgiven easily." "But you're still alive," Leif observed. "If it was so bad, why didn't they kill you?"
"Because Sigurd and I grew up together. We were like brothers. He couldn't bring himself to order my death, so he chose exile instead, a living death for a warrior, to be separated from his clan and purpose." Leif digested this, blue eyes solemn in the firelight. "Can you get your honor back?" "I don't know," Ivar answered honestly. "I've been trying for 3 years. Maybe this, helping you, is part of that path. Or maybe some stains never wash clean." "My father used to say that a man makes his own fate," Leif said quietly. "That the gods favor the brave, not the perfect." Ivar smiled faintly. "That sounds like Halfdan." They finished their meal in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them, snow falling steadily outside. Later, as Leif drifted toward sleep on his temporary bed of extra furs, Ivar found himself watching the boy with a mixture of fear and determination. He had failed Sigurd, failed his clan, failed himself. He could not, would not, fail this child who had somehow been placed in his care. Whatever came next, Ulfric's revenge, the village's lingering suspicions, the challenges of raising a boy in exile, he would face it with the same resolve that had once made him a respected warrior. As Leif's breathing deepened into sleep, Ivar moved to check the door's securing bar one final time. Through the small window he could see only swirling snow, the world beyond reduced to white uncertainty. Yet for the first time in years, that uncertainty held something beyond mere survival. It held possibility. The days that followed established new patterns for both Ivar and Leif. Mornings began early, with Ivar teaching the boy essential skills: how to maintain weapons, read weather signs, move silently through forest and field. Afternoons often found them with Astrid, where Leif proved an eager student of healing arts, while Ivar relearned patience watching the boy's careful concentration. The village's attitude toward them remained complex, some welcoming, others wary, most reserving judgment. Gunnar had been true to his word. Ivar now joined hunting parties, his skill with bow and spear grudgingly acknowledged even by those who still whispered traitor behind his back. Leif, for his part, navigated his new world with remarkable resilience. Though nightmares sometimes woke him crying out Ulfric's name, daylight hours saw him increasingly confident. He began cautious friendships with village children, shared stories of his father with elders who had known Halfdan, and transformed Ivar's sparse dwelling into something approaching a home through small, thoughtful arrangements. The wooden amulet remained always around his neck, though neither he nor Ivar spoke often of its significance. What mattered was not what secrets it might contain, but what it represented. A father's love, a heritage preserved, a promise kept. Winter deepened around Hrafnsfjord, sealing the village in ice and snow. Ulfric Gudmundsson had departed as ordered, his dark threats hanging in the air behind him, but no retribution had yet materialized. Some began to hope the matter had ended with the council's judgment. Ivar knew better. Men like Ulfric did not forget or forgive. The only questions were when and how vengeance would come. 6 weeks after the council, as the winter solstice approached, a messenger arrived from a southern settlement. The news he brought cast a pall over Hramsfjord. Jarl Eriksson himself was rumored to be gathering warriors. His intentions unclear, but his anger at Gunnar's defiance widely known. That evening, Ivar was summoned to the Jarl's hall for a private council. Leif, left in Astrid's care, watched him go with worried eyes that had seen too much conflict already. The hall's interior glowed with firelight, shadows dancing across carved pillars that told stories of the gods and heroes.
Gunnar sat at the high table with his closest advisers, their faces grave in the flickering light. "Skjoldsson," Gunnar acknowledged as Ivar approached, "you've heard the news?" "About Jarl Eriksson, yes." The Jarl gestured for him to sit, a courtesy that would have been unthinkable months ago. "What do you make of it?" The direct question surprised Ivar. Despite his partial rehabilitation, he hadn't expected to be consulted on matters of clan security. If the rumors are true, he'll wait until the weather breaks. The mountain passes are impassable now. Agreed. That gives us perhaps 6 weeks, maybe 8 if the winter holds. Gunnar leaned forward, firelight highlighting the new lines worry had etched into his face. The question is, what does he want? Revenge for the insult to Ulfric, or something more? "The amulet," Ivar said without hesitation. "Whatever it truly contains, they want it badly enough to risk war." Tormund, who sat at Gunnar's right, nodded slowly. The boy is the key to all of it. Perhaps he should be sent away, for his safety and ours. The suggestion sent a chill through Ivar that had nothing to do with the winter night. Send Leif away? After everything they had built together? To where? He challenged. What place would be beyond Jarl Eriksson's reach if he's determined enough? And who would protect him as I would? "Calm yourself, Skjoldsson," Gunnar said, though without rebuke. "No decision has been made. We consider all options." Another advisor spoke up, Håkon, a seasoned warrior whose opinion carried weight. "What if we simply returned the amulet? Keep the boy, give back their heirloom. It might satisfy honor on both sides." "It's not ours to give," Ivar replied, struggling to keep his voice level. "Halfdan gave it to his son. Taking it from Leif would dishonor that gift and our debt to his father." Gunnar studied him thoughtfully. "You've become quite protective of the boy in a short time, Skjoldsson." "He's my responsibility now," Ivar answered simply. "By your own judgment." A faint smile crossed the Jarl's face. "So he is." He turned to address the entire council. "We will not send the boy away, nor take what rightfully belongs to him. Ravensfjord stands by its judgments, whatever comes." Relief washed through Ivar, followed immediately by concern. Gunnar's decision was honorable, but potentially dangerous for the entire settlement. If Jarl Eriksson brought his full strength against them when spring came, "We should prepare defenses," Ivar suggested. "Strengthen the eastern approaches, store additional weapons and provisions." Gunnar nodded. "Already underway. But there's another matter that concerns the boy directly." He fixed Ivar with a penetrating gaze. "Astrid believes the amulet contains more than the location of burial treasures. She thinks it may hold information vital to both clans, knowledge of a shared ancestor that could end the feud permanently." This was unexpected. What kind of knowledge? "She's uncertain. The symbols are ancient, predating our settlements here. But if she's right, understanding what the amulet truly contains might prevent bloodshed rather than cause it." Ivar considered this new information. "You want Leif to work with Astrid to decipher it?" "With your supervision," Gunnar confirmed. "The boy trusts you. He'll be more willing to explore the amulet's secrets with your encouragement." The request made sense, yet something about it troubled Ivar. "And if what we discover only increases Jarl Eriksson's desire to possess it?" "Then at least we'll know what we're fighting for," Gunnar replied grimly. "Better that than blood spilled over ignorance." As Ivar left the hall, the weight of the situation settled heavily upon him. He had sought only to save one child from cruelty.
Now he found himself at the center of a conflict that could engulf both clans. Yet beneath the anxiety lay a surprising realization. For the first time in 3 years, he felt fully alive, engaged with a purpose beyond mere survival, connected to something larger than his own shame. Astrid's dwelling glowed with warm light as he approached. Through the small window, he could see Leif seated by the hearth, listening intently as the older woman demonstrated some technique with herbs and mortar. The boy's face was animated, eager, so different from the frightened child he'd found by the frozen creek. Ivar paused, watching them for a moment before announcing his presence. Whatever came next, whether peace or conflict, revelation or continued mystery, he would protect what they had built together. Not just for Leif's sake, nor for the debt owed to Halfdan, but for his own redemption. A path back to honor that had appeared when he least expected it. The door opened before he could knock, Astrid's knowing smile greeting him. "Right on time, Skjoldsson. We've been waiting for you." Leif looked up, relief washing over his features. "Ivar, did the Jarl send you away? Are we leaving?" "No," Ivar assured him, crossing to kneel beside the boy. "We're staying right here, but we have important work to do, all 3 of us." "What kind of work?" Leif asked, curiosity replacing concern. Ivar glanced at Astrid, who nodded encouragement. "It's time to learn what your father's gift truly means," he said, gently touching the wooden amulet that hung around Leif's neck. "Not just for you and me, but for all of Hransfjord, and perhaps for peace between our clans." Understanding dawned in Leif's eyes, the solemn comprehension of a child forced to grow up too quickly. "Because of Ulfric? Because he's coming back?" "Yes," Ivar answered honestly, "but this time we'll be ready." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing Hransfjord in pristine white that would eventually give way to spring thaw and whatever challenges it brought. But inside, by firelight, 3 figures bent together over an ancient wooden amulet, seeking wisdom that might transform enemies into allies, strangers into family, and a miserable journey into an unexpected homecoming. For Ivar Skjoldsson, once disgraced warrior, and now guardian to a remarkable child, the last winter had indeed brought redemption, not through grand gestures or battlefield glory, but through the simple, profound courage to protect one vulnerable life when it mattered most. In doing so, he had discovered that true honor resided not in strength or conquest, but in compassion demonstrated even when the world stood against you. And in that discovery lay the greatest victory of all. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. We're just getting started and we really need your support. And may the gods grant you a legendary life.